Crocodiles, with their built-in armor, massive sizes, devastating bites, and unsettling smiles, are just about the meanest things you can find in the entire animal kingdom. It certainly doesn't help that they also have garnered a reputation for being, well, mean. And saying these guys have short tempers is the understatement of the century, with a few of them, like the saltwater crocodile, often being considered among the world's most aggressive animals. But there is another animal that gives Crocs a run for their money in the scary department. And, hint hint, they kind of make a sound that goes like dun-dun. And in case you're like, what the heck are these noises he's making, I'm talking about sharks. Now, statistically, they're not as mean as Crocs, at least not to humans. But boy oh boy, can sharks be terrifying? I mean, just look at this, or even this. So yeah, you get the point. And I've got some unwelcome news for you, because these two bad little nightmares can actually be found swimming in the same places, in certain environments and in one country. I mean, you can even spot the pair feasting together on whales. And yes, thank you, Australia. And so, obviously, this is not great, but it could be worse. And how so, you may ask? Well, unlike tigers and lions, we do not have to worry about the two getting together and creating some sort of freakazoid hybrid. I mean, Jaws alone is scary enough. So just imagine if it had been a croc shark hybrid instead. No, thank you. So fortunately, no such fusion exists anywhere. But, and it's a big but, once upon a time, they did. Or at least nature came awfully close to creating a real 2-4-1 combo. Fact, well over 100 million years ago, an entire group of predators existed that are simply best summarized by their wholesome nickname, the shark crocs. Yet, officially, they bear a different name, the Deinosuchus. And while these guys have earned themselves a moniker, that would lead you to believe that they re both shark and croc. They, of course, were. Not as that goes against both the rules of nature and my own personal rules, too. And so obviously they were just one of these things, in this case, the latter, with Deinosuchus currently being classified as a clade of ancient crocodilomorphs that sprouted up during the early Jurassic, and who, despite not being real crocodiles as far as the modern definition goes, were distant cousins to the very same ones we see today. Now naturally, they weren't the only group of ancient crocodilomorphs, but they were the ones that, unfortunately for the rest of the planet, decided to venture into marine environments way more than normal, triggering a one-of-a-kind evolutionary journey wherein many of them eventually became fully aquatic marine predators, who spread far and wide during the Jurassic period, enjoying the warm tropical waters that were more abundant at the time. And in these already hellish waters, many turned into apex predators as well, playing similar roles as sharks do today. But let's be honest, just swimming around a lot in the ocean is quite an underwhelming reason for something to be named shark crocs. And I imagine you're expecting something a bit more shark-like than this. But before you click away in frustration, there's something you should know, which is that not all Deinosuchus really lived up to their nickname, some only fitting the crocodile part of the name, if you get my drift. And this is mainly the result of a great split that existed amongst this clade, which divided the group into two, with the end result being two superfamilies, the Teleosauriata and the Metriorhynchoida. And these names might not sound that important, but they are, because these two are perhaps the ultimate example of the difference between taking the road more traveled and the one less traveled, or better yet, the one that frankly has never been used. And I say this because the first superfamily, the Teleosauroida, were the kind of guys who did the same old, being in some cases marine-based, but not exactly very adapted for life at sea. Something which has been seen periodically through history with other groups as well, who could traverse through salt water, yet mostly retained classical croc shape and features. So, a bit dull. But with that said, this is not to say that these guys couldn't be interesting or intimidating, because they did get gosh darn big. Case in point, the Mishimosaurus, penultimate teleosaurid, and the biggest Jurassic croc that we know of, measuring the same length as two mid-sized female giraffes stacked on top of one another, while weighing over 3 tons. So, not a pretty sight, to say the least. And of course, in typical crocodilian fashion, they had jaws to match their grisly appearance, bearing teeth specifically designed for seizing and crushing large prey, namely poor turtles. But occasionally, it does seem like dinosaurs ended up getting nipped as well, seeing that even sauropod bones found in one formation showed signs of an S being munched on by a Mechimosaurus, which possibly serves as evidence that even the biggest land animals on Earth could ungo to the beach without having to worry about their own version of Jaws. Yet alas, the Mechimosaurus is not what you've come for, nor is, frankly, any other teleosauroid, as the real shark crocs were the Metroenchoida, a group that decided to essentially throw the book of evolution out the window, going on a journey that no other CROC did or has done so since, becoming hyperadapted for marine life. In fact, out of all artosaurs, so birds, crocodilians, non-avian dinosaurs, etc., they alone were by far the best adapted to water, basically reaching a point where they stopped even looking like crocodilomorphs. And this glope wasn't exactly something that happened over one summer, but rather occurred gradually over millions of years. But it did begin quite early on, with a divide playing out some 180 million years ago, spurred on by rising water levels, increasing temperatures, and a lack in sharks hogging the food chain at the time, which allowed the Metroenchoida's ancestors to take to the seas and take their places, namely around a chain of islands that would one day come to form Europe. Not exactly where you'd expect to see Crocs, yet. It was there where this family went to their next level. It began with the tails, which slowly turned from rounded ends into shark-like flukes, and thus increasing the surface area and providing some more oomph every time their tail slapped against the water. And then, meanwhile, their hands and feet slowly lost musculature, while also stretching out, increasing the surface area once more, and in some cases, even fully developing into fins, which is a first for archosaurs. And then, in another shocker, these guys also lost something we generally regard as sacred to crocodiles, that being their armor. Specifically osteoderms and scales, with this group seemingly taking inspiration from their coexisting buds, the ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs evolving smooth, scaleless skin instead. And this might seem like a step in the wrong direction, just chucking out some pretty nifty armor straight into the trash. But their new skin came with a benefit of being less drag-resistant. And sometimes in the ocean, it's better to have a need for speed over defense, especially when you're the one doing the chasing. And ultimately, these guys became so wickedly well adapted for swimming that they're stout amongst paleontologists that any were even capable of terrestrial locomotion. And just to drive this point further, that they truly had turned their backs on land, there is indirect evidence from their bone morphologies, which suggests that they might have practiced live birthing out at sea, giving up on the whole laying eggs on land. And this may not sound crazy, but it is, seeing that it would make them, again, the only archosaurs known to do so. And so with all this said, obviously they're a bit off compared to their relatives, but they did retain some classical traits. It's like being carnivorous predators who wielded wicked jaws, definitely fully earning them the title of shark crocs. And it may not come as a surprise to hear that turning a croc into a super swimmer that doesn't need to come back to land is a very powerful thing. And pretty rapidly, members of this group spread from across the majority of Europe all the way into the Western Hemisphere, taking up residences in various parts of North and South America as well, where they enjoyed pelagic lives. In other words, the open waters away from shore where marine life can swim freely in any direction. So, they had choices. This is a luxury that I, for one, am quite jealous of, because while you or me can drive in almost any direction as well, we queue and do so without some inconveniences like stopping for gas or grabbing a quick bite to eat, which, as you may know, can start to add up quite fast. And that's why I'm grateful that nowadays we have amazing things like Upside, today's sponsor, which is a 100% free and easy-to-use app that allows you to earn back cash every time you grab food, stock up on groceries, or fill up your tank. The best part is that they've made it very, very straightforward. All you need to do is open up your Upside app, claim an offer from one of over 100,000 different gas stations, grocery stores, or restaurants near you, and then pay like normal, which afterwards Upside will then give you real cash back. No strange reward points or odd prizes, just money you can send right back to your bank. And not even a week ago, I drove across states, which also means a lot of gas and some food as well. And Upside came in absolute clutch during this journey. And I'm not the only one that Upside has helped out, as to date, they've given back $1 billion to their users. and top earners are making as much as $300 every single month. And so to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to download Upside and use code EXTINCTSU to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon in your first tank of gas. And now, back to the video. And it wasn't just the sheer range that these reptilians had going on, but also density. As in various environments, multiple kinds could be found. The more the merrier, I guess. I mean, we even know that in the Kimmeridge Clay Formation in England, that there wasn't just 1 or 2 species swimming around, but 6 at the minimum. That's a lot of croc. And in case you had forgotten, this was the Jurassic we're talking about. So in those areas, you still find plesiosaurs, pliosaurs, ichthyosaurs, sharks, and other carnivorous fish. So adding 6 shark crocs to the list honestly just ain't fair. And the unfairness continues in that an abundance of sea crocs did, and actually make their lives any harder. Only yours, presuming you're a Jurassic seagoer. As instead of competing, these guys chose niche partitioning instead. In other words, each becoming great at killing their own things. And this mainly manifested in 2 ways: body size and teeth. At the one end of the spectrum, you had the, let's say, less intimidating shark crocs like the gracillinists, who were relatively speaking not so big with this genus, in particular only measuring around 5 feet or 1.52 meters at its max. So think a fair-sized alligator gar, i.e. you wouldn't necessarily be happy about swimming into one. But it wouldn't be the end of the world, literally, as it likely would not be interested in you. As coincidentally, its snout was a bit like that of a gar as well, being narrow and slender, designed to catch, and pierce smaller prey like fish, as well as the occasional crustacean or cephalopod, which are actually kind of off limits for most crocs, as they are too salty, and thus eating them leads to dehydration. It being a marine-adapted species, the gracillinists, like its other relatives, had salt glands that allowed them to eat cephalopods without care, and even in a sense, drink salt water. And from fossil records we've gathered, the gracillinists stuck to the waters off the coast of Jurassic Germany, which were subtropical back then. Yet, metrioranchids of similar sizes could be found in many other areas too, ensuring fish everywhere could experience the same profound displeasure of being hunted by shark crocs. And really, these smaller-sized members could kind of be categorized together as the fish eaters. That's typically what they stuck to. But even this envelope could be pushed, as some of these sushi lovers were a bit sizier. So you could say there's probably no better example of this than the metrioranchus itself. And if you're a paleocon, there's actually a chance you've seen this guy in the past. But before I get to that, I'll just say that this genus was definitely a step up from the previous, with it almost cracking the double digits in feet, as it was about 9.8 feet at its longest, or around 3 meters. But it still had a more slender build and snout, so sushi it was. Now this being said, it could eat some pretty dang big fish. As the remains of one fossil show that it partially devoured the gills of the fish, Deinosuchus, which is a pretty metal considering that Deinosuchus is the largest non-shark fish to have ever lived. And how big is that, you may ask? Well, about 45 tons and 54 feet or 16.5 meters from head to tail. So we're talking about a sperm whale-sized fish here, and so clearly this meant that metrioranchus had quite the appetite. But I will say that we don't know if it was scavenging a carcass or taking a free bite out of a dying individual. But the point still stands, which is that just because something primarily eats fish does not mean that you should feel too safe around it, especially when applied to the shark crocs. However, with that said, I would still take the metrioranchus any day over the next step up in the shark croc lineage. It's any bigger than this. And you start to notice some new traits. Let's just say they're nothing good. Namely, the larger members seem to have developed broader, more powerful jaws and teeth that were deadly to pretty much everything. Not just fish, as they became laterally compressed and often serrated, allowing them to shear through flesh like butter. And a prime example of a metrioranchid in this power class would be the Deinosuchus, who also happens to be arguably the most famous of the bunch, for good reason, as it was an uncomfortably common face during the Jurassic and early Cretaceous. Showing up in 3 different continents, those being Europe, North America, and South America, where in each it was a straight-up menace. And this is also where swimming into a shark croc goes from unsettling to Straight up lethal, as these guys would 100% be interested in something your size, and 110% capable of dealing with you, to seeing that the Deinosuchus could be 5 meters or 16 feet in length. So, think large tiger shark. Except the problem here is that their teeth actually give the modern tiger sharks a run for their money. Or should I say a swim for their money, being very similar to those seen in certain dinosaurs. In fact, these teeth were so similar that when its teeth were first discovered by paleontologists, they thought they had found another megalosaurus, not a marine croc. And those teeth, in conjunction with some opposite jaws, also gave the Deinosuchus the ability to hunt prey much larger than itself. And it has even been implicated in taking down the likes of Ophthalmosaurus, which was also a marine reptile, being a bigger ichthyosaur, which is about the size of a massive great white. And though it is hard to say for sure, the Deinosuchus is often labeled to have been hypercarnivorous, which gobbled up just about anything it could catch, including plesiosaurs, fish sharks, pterosaurs that ventured too close, or even others of its own kind. Additionally, paleontologists believe that Deinosuchus was among its environment's top hunters, and was probably an apex predator. And though I am using Deinosuchus as an example of the lethality of shark crocs, I do want to stress that it was by no means the exception. As after all, there are multiple other medium to large-sized metriorhynchids who spread terror throughout the seas, including the Geosaurus, Suchus, and Tyrannosaurus, which, based upon the genus name alone, you should know it was not good news. And I'd even go so far as to say that these guys were even meaner than the Deinosuchus, as Geosaurus wasn't necessarily larger, but it did have the largest teeth of the entire family, which even rivaled those of certain megatheropods like the Crocodile, who was, by the way, up to 10 times heavier. Meanwhile, Tyrannosaurus and Suchus could both be above 5 meters or 16 feet and had teeth that were alarmingly blade-like in shape, reminding us all once again that shark crocs in particular were built to kill anything, be it things their size, smaller, or larger. Interestingly, though, not all bigger metriorhynchids chose to follow this dental path, at least not to the same degree as a few actually ended up walking or swimming the line between specialized fishers and big game hunters, which is nicely demonstrated by Deinosuchus, who is regarded as a transitional form. Its body was long and robust, comparable to a great white. Its teeth were more chunky than usual, yet its snout was still on the narrower side, relatively speaking, and it had more teeth than normal. An apparent sign that it liked its daily dose of omega-3, seeing that more shiny pearls usually meant better odds of ensnaring pesky agile fish. However, just a quick forewarning to all my time travelers out there. Please do not feel like this implies you could swim up to this guy and leave unharmed, as it likely had no problem with non-fish food. And if you need any more reasons not to pet it, know that the largest specimens discovered were still not done growing, meaning you need a bigger boat. And even then, you still likely have problems, as one study found it to have likely rivaled the size of Deinosuchus. And while the name probably means naught to you, let's just say it's terrible news, because simply put, Deinosuchus until this point had been completely in its own weight class amongst its family, holding the distinct title of being the largest metriorhynchid to have ever arisen. First appearing during the Jurassic period, the Deinosuchus popped up between England and Spain, where in its ecosystems it was among the largest predators, period, achieving a length up to 8 meters or 26 feet. And honestly, that size, it's kind of hard to imagine a finned croc that large. So another way to digest this is imagining being stalked by something the size of a killer whale. That looked a bit like a crocodile minus the scales and then just tossing fins and a tail fluke for good measure. Not exactly comforting thoughts. It goes without saying that the Deinosuchus didn't get any nicer than its kin at this size, possessing its very own hellish mouth that was decorated with dozens upon dozens of large, robust, curved teeth, which could deliver devastating bites, capable of removing huge slabs of flesh and causing rapid blood loss and shock, and also death. And part of the reason why its bites were so lethal, beyond just having sharp teeth, was that its skull, even for a croc, was absurdly sturdy, dense, and robust. And yes, these words are a bit redundant, but it was just that thick, and you definitely did not want to be caught by one under any circumstances. Though frankly, avoiding capture was basically a hopeless situation, as the Deinosuchus, despite being a chunkster, was still a speed demon, possessing not only elongated fins, but also a very large tail, and was all in all, quite the package and more than enough to thrust the sea croc all the way to the top of the food chain. As it appears that the Deinosuchus evolved to take down what usually were considered the untouchables. In other words, the other marine reptiles. And that's pretty insane, because while not so domineering now, during the Jurassic, marine reptiles were the goats of the sea. And I don't mean like the curly-horned ones, with these guys reigning supreme just about everywhere and came in many shapes and sizes to the plesiosaurs, pliosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and of course, others. And obviously some of these guys were giant, with a few being apex predators in their own right. And overall, life was good for this bunch. And yet to Deinosuchus, they were just food. And it might have even held the edge over other apex predators in the region. I mean, to be honest, the only group that really would pose a problem or challenge to the larger metrioranchids were potentially the pliosaurs, who could be a tad longer and heavier. But I wouldn't count the homies out just yet. I mean, just take a peek at those teeth. And nature certainly didn't either, as overall the 17 or so genera of sea Crocs that emerged would curl the Earth's seas for millions upon millions of years despite the pliosaurs with lone genera. Like the Deinosuchus even enjoying reigns for over 20 million years. Of course though, when we look around today, there aren't any flippered crocs swimming around, thankfully. But it does beg the question of where they went, because I mean, how does something that seems so overpowered go extinct in the first place? We're talking about a shark crocodile here, and that's the thing. We can't actually seem to figure out what happened, with the only concrete piece of information being that at some point in the early Cretaceous, this group disappeared, with the youngest member having been the Neptunodraco, who disappeared around 136 million years ago. While no breakthroughs have been made on their extinction, there are a few hypotheses on what brought down this one-of-a-kind family. The first idea points a finger at a common suspect, Mother Nature herself. As during the Jurassic-Cretaceous boundary, the Earth did undergo marine regression, causing a supposed crash in metrioranchid biodiversity. And then, while already down on their knees, or flippers in this case, they were dealt to other big blows. Climate change and a shift in marine biota, causing their already stressed state to turn fatal. And thus they slowly faded away. But given the fact they did make it into the early Cretaceous, even if not for that long, some believe that the end of the Jurassic didn't actually have much to do with their vanishing, and thus leading to the second idea, which ironically starts with something that feared these crocs. Fish, specifically teleosts, who underwent significant diversification. Around this time, which was a problem as many shark crocs struggled to keep up with their evolving prey, kind of like a reverse Ono. And then to make matters worse, it was in their final days that a new opponent appeared on the scene, one that would undo things for many, and that was the mosasaurs, which actually were unnervingly a lot like the shark crocs. A bad omen for the latter, as the mosasaurs would come to take over. With the idea being that this hostile invasion of the waters proved too much for our Crocy friends, thus they conceded control over the oceans, and ending the only time that shark-like crocs were a thing. And if you want to learn more about the sheer craziness that was Archosaurs, then I suggest you check out my video on what was essentially the deadliest ocean of all time. Anyways, thanks for watching, and until next time on Worldly History.